You've done everything you were supposed to do, and yet here you are in midlife feeling untethered. Your body's changing, your energy's off, and a part of you quietly wonders, is this just how life is now? But what if this wasn't the end of something? What if it's the beginning? A portal into the next, truest version of you. This is Women's Health Unwrapped. I'm Nicola Fondell, and each week we strip back the noise around health and habits so you can finally feel clear, capable and confident in your body again. And today I'm joined by Michelle Boyde, identity alchemist and confidant to high impact women, to guide you through the power of self-mastery, embodiment and identity evolution so you can stop surviving midlife and start becoming the woman you know you're here to be. So let's get into this brilliant conversation with Michelle. Hi Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, so nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Nicola.
Yes, you're very welcome. It's great to get to chat with you on this interesting topic. I know it's one that I think is going to, just explore something that we probably haven't explored in quite this way in any of the previous episodes. So I'm excited to see where we go with it. But just to get us started, I'd love to find out from you what your most impactful habit is in your toolkit at the moment.
For me, it has to be hypnosis, actually.
Oh.
So I do a lot of self-hypnosis, and for me, it's very much connecting in with the body. And I'm sure we'll get on to talking a lot about the body as we go through this conversation. But a lot of the time, we get very fixated on operating up here in our thoughts, and our body is this like wealth of wisdom. So I spend a lot of time sitting with my body and actually feeling what's happening in my body day to day, and because that's where we're actually able to release a lot of stuff that feels uncomfortable. So that's really my habit. Mm-hmm. It's very simple. It's just sitting with the body. Yeah.
And actually, so I'm going to ask you about that, because when you said what your habit was, you said it's the self-hypnosis, and then you've shared that it's sitting with your body and giving yourself that space and opportunity to connect with the subconscious mind. And we have had a guest previously do a full episode on hypnosis. She'd delivered a TEDx talk on how she believes we're living in a hypnotic state because we're operating essentially from our subconscious the majority of the time. And it was really interesting. But I'm sure we'll have listeners who haven't listened to that episode. It was quite a while ago. So you've said hypnosis, but yeah, share with me then, when you're using this as a habit with yourself, it probably is very different to what many people think of when they just hear that term hypnosis.
Yeah, I mean, when people hear the word hypnosis, they often think pendulums, chicken dances, stage hypnosis. And, there are so many ways to describe it. But what I'm really talking about is when you shift your awareness from what's happening up here in your thoughts, so your conscious awareness, and then you shift it in to the rest of your body. Because what you will find is that not all of the body is subconscious, but all of the subconscious is in the body. And so, for example, to start to make this a little bit real for you, is if I say to you, can you place your awareness on your left hand, for argument's sake? You can place your awareness on your left hand. It's very easy for you to place your awareness on your thoughts and tell me what you're thinking if you want to. But there's lots of other parts of your body that if I say place your awareness on, say, your gallbladder, it feels tricky to do. But there's so much wisdom and intelligence and stuff happening in the rest of the body that we're simply not aware of. And these are these automations, this programming that this other guest would have been talking about. And so, our whole perspective, if we're living just up in our heads, is actually very narrow. And sometimes, the solutions that we need to our problems and the new perspectives that we're looking for are all sitting below the neck. And so, a lot of the work that I do, it's for people who are sort of done talking to an extent. They've done lots of talking about stuff, and they actually want to go in and work more deeply with their body, their subconscious, and their energetic field.
Oh, yeah, I love this. And I think that leads us very nicely to talk about what you do and how we can share this with the listeners so that they can think about taking this into their toolbox and creating some healthy habits, perhaps around what we're going to share today, because your work's dedicated to the liminal space. So I'd love to know what that is. And I think that that's linked to what you've just shared there, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So the liminal space is that in-between space. And we have liminal spaces throughout life. So, there's physical liminal spaces like, airports, corridors, when you're between destinations. Menopause, perimenopause particularly is a liminal state, for women when they're moving between these two stages of life. And the work that I do as an identity alchemist is the liminal space between identities. So this is when you've been shedding this one identity. You kind of, you're not her anymore. You're letting go of that version of yourself. And yet you haven't yet fully embodied or become the next version of yourself. So you're in this weird in between, and that's that liminal space. It's this in between of identities. So the work I do is to help you navigate through that liminal space and then embody or master your elevated identity. And the thing with the liminal space is this isn't this kind of just ongoing evolution and growth that we go through. The liminal space is this terrain that you move through when it's a really big shift. Because when you land in that elevated identity, you look back at the woman that you were and you're like, I'm just not her anymore at all. And the thing with this space is that it's a place of contrast, as with all of life, in that, it can be completely overwhelming and yet it's full of possibility. So one minute you're sort of like, oh gosh, what's happening to me? The next minute you're like, there's so much possibility of what I'm turning into. It's this space where lots of stuff comes up for you to reprocess so you can really step into that version of yourself. And going through perimenopause as well is definitely one of those spaces. And, the women I work with feel themselves in this space, but that's certainly a contributing factor into that experience of that liminal. But it's a wonderful space because it's your opportunity to really elevate your life into what it's going to be next.
I love that. And this is why I was so interested to have this conversation with you, because I hadn't heard what you've just shared talked about in the way that you share it and are an expert. I think many of us, and obviously in the work I do, I'm very aware of this, but many of us as women kind of know that there are times in our lives where we may feel like we're in this space, this almost grey area or black hole, it might even feel like, for some women, because I don't think we've been taught or supported to see, as you've just explained, the opportunity that being in a space like that can bring. And as you were talking, I was thinking, for me, I've only got one child. When I had my daughter, I was definitely in a liminal space there. It's such a big new area, and you are becoming a new version of yourself, as you say, that elevated identity. And I think what we have been taught and inherited about menopause and midlife as a whole means that so many women already have a perception that shift, they know there's going to be a shift, and many women only think of it in the context of their reproductive system stopping and no longer working and not having their monthly period. But they see it already as something negative, because we've been taught, as I say, we've inherited a majority anyway in our generation, have inherited that negativity bias around what midlife means. But what you're saying, and what I absolutely believe, is that this is such a huge monumental shift in our life, probably the biggest shift I think most women will ever experience, because of all of the physiological changes that are happening and what that then brings around mentally, that you have this incredible new path ahead of you. But it's seeing it as that, which is what we're trying to support women around, isn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And I think that the challenge comes here is there's always two things happening, right? Because there's always a balance. So there is stuff leaving you and there is stuff appearing in your life. So, in terms of menopause, of course, you're losing your fertility, but what's coming instead of that? And I think that the challenge when you're in that liminal space, whether we're talking perimenopause, menopause, or we're just talking another big identity shift in life, is often the focus is what is changing, what's leaving, my life as opposed to what might fill the space. And of course, what's tricky is because you're not yet in the new identity. So, for example, if you haven't fully passed through menopause or you haven't landed in your elevated identity, you can't see what's there because you're not there yet. So there's this big place of trust where what you're being asked to do is let go of stuff, trusting something else more brilliant is going to fill the space. You can't see what that is yet, but you just got to trust that something else is coming in. But that is deeply uncomfortable because when you're in that space, you find that your relationships change, your work changes, your body changes. There's lots we can say about the body that's not even a perimenopause thing, but just an identity thing. And you're grieving that, but if you can also balance your focus around what's going to come in, that's where you can really create the hope and the excitement, because it is really, really exciting what is going to come in next for you. And when I talk about this elevate identity and the liminal space is actually asking you one thing, one big thing, and that is to master your next identity. It's about mastery, and your liberation comes through this mastery. And the thing with mastery is it's not about adding more. If you think about mastery in terms of, say, business and careers, often people think mastery is, deepening my capability, it's learning more skills, it's having a better strategy. But actually, it's about personal mastery, which is taking all the stuff that you kind of know up here and making sure that it deeply is mastered throughout your body. And this is the thing, when I think about it in terms of perimenopause, and as I say, a lot of my clients are women in their 40s and their 50s. So they've got the two things happening at the same time. It's actually about what can you let go of? And when I talk to women, and you're the expert on this more than me, but when I talk to women who've gone through menopause, I hear so much that it's about, I've just let go of stuff. I don't tolerate this. It's almost been this upgrade in what I am not wasting my time and my energy on, and it's a similar thing when you go through a big, identity alchemy, is that you've got to know what to let go of, grieve it, let it go, and sit in the uncomfortable space that something better is coming.
Yeah. Oh, I really enjoy what you're saying there. And what I've experienced, and I think we're seeing this more and more, is that the world we live in has created this need to have whatever we want or fix any problem quickly. We've got this whole dopamine addiction part of our society and culture at the moment, and tech, social media has certainly added to that. And I think women are really struggling with those shifts, and they can feel something is changing, but they're afraid of that change. And because we do have this tendency towards looking for a quick fix, it's that mentality of, okay, well, let's go to the doctor and let's see if I can get something to help me and feel better here, or let's look online and what can I buy, what supplement can I take, or what book could I read, and then that's it, quickly it's answered. But that isn't how this works, is it? And I think that's what so many women are struggling with. And certainly in my business, from a marketing perspective, that's what I'm trying to overcome, is that approach we have, because that's just how we've been brought up and what the world around us looks like right now. And what you're saying and what I'm aligned to is that this is about really taking that pause to connect with what you are experiencing, what you're feeling, and looking ahead at what you want to feel in the future and what life looks like for you. And something you mentioned there, Michelle, was self-trust. And I loved when you said that, because when I work with clients in my main one-to-one program, a big part of what we're doing through the coaching is aligning them to their values and them building that self-trust. And it's always something that really surprises women when I first bring it up. When I ask them, do you trust yourself? Most of them are kind of instantly like, well, yeah, I think so, but are a bit taken aback by what, I'm not sure I even know what that means, but I assume it's a yes. And I think that's something, again, we're just not taught as girls, as young women, and then in adulthood, but is often at the root of why you can then struggle when life does bring these new, obstacles, changes, and create that liminal space.
So I completely agree with you. And actually, one of the things I always talk about is this deferring always to outside sources, whether it's another podcast, another book, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, I believe very strongly that the person who knows best for me is always me, and the same for you. And this is a big part, I think, of tapping also into your feminine intuition. And women know stuff. They know what is right for themselves. They just don't choose to trust the deep knowing that they have inside of them. And I think sometimes when you talk about do you trust yourself, it can feel, as you said, like quite an abstract concept. How would I know if I trust myself? And I always think one of the places is, where do you actually place your energy? And what I mean by this is, if you are forever throwing your energy outside of yourself. So we do this as women, as carers. Yes, we put our energy outside to our children, to our partners, etc. But when we're always deferring to outside sources of information, we scatter that energy. We scatter our power. And one of the things that I do with clients, and I always get them saying like, wow, I can't believe the impact of this, is I actually help them pull the energy physically back in and place it in their body, and place it lower in their body, and actually place it down here in their pelvic bowl, where they then feel this sturdiness, this groundedness. And it makes us much more magnetic, because we're literally, our energy is our power, and we're just pulling it all back in to ourselves. And so I agree with you. During this space, if you don't have the answer, that's just your head that's conditioned to say, we need clarity, we need clarity. You actually don't need clarity. You just need to pull your energy in, feel grounded, trust what's happening next. And if you're listening to this, I do have a identity alchemy archetype quiz, which might be worth taking, because there's different ways that different women will move through that liminal space. So, there's one archetype, which is, I call it the calibrating vessel. And she's the woman that feels like she's been in that liminal for like a really long time. She feels like she's been doing so much stuff and she just feels stuck. She's really in between. It's like one arm is holding the branch of the old identity, the other one is reaching for the next one. She can't seem to find it. She's quite emotionally tired, and she's at that stage where she's like, do I want the thing I want? I'm not sure. So we've got, the calibrating vessel. Then we've got what I call the shifting force. This is the woman who's like bouncing around in this liminal space. The emotional roller coaster is huge. One day she's like, I'm Wonder Woman and I've got this. The next minute she's crying in a corner going, oh my God, I don't know what's happening. And she's full of energy and she's full of excitement, but at the same time, it's just this very fluctuating experience. And then the final archetype is what I call the landing leader. And this is the woman who's actually walked most of that liminal space. And she's right at that edge of her elevated identity. So some days of the week, some hours of the week, she feels her. She's like, I am her. And then she sort of slips in and she slips out. So what she's doing is she's at that last stage of full mastery and landing that new identity that she's got in herself. But with all of these, they're all asking for mastery of self. And so the most powerful thing you can do is trust yourself.
And this is the approach that I take to the season of life that menopause shifts us into, is that it is a renewal. It is a season like we have the physical seasons in an environmental sense. And it's a time to shed, to, I think, get very retrospective and just go in to understand who you are. And the work you do sounds like that's very much about that element and that view that I have on it. And I think it's that point in life where many of us realize we're not living how we would have liked to have been living at this age and stage of our lives. And I think that's where, for many women, it throws a lot of turmoil their way, because they realize this isn't how I want to live, and I'm maybe even past the middle point of my life, and what can I do, and is there anything I can do to change this? And I think that can become, if you imagine that tornado scene in The Wizard of Oz at the very beginning, it's kind of like that, where everything, all of the objects, the furniture, the people, Dorothy's stuck in the tornado. And I think for so many women, it must feel like that, where it just feels out of control and something needs to change, and there needs to be shifts, and life needs to feel and look different. But how do you do that? And when you couple that with some of the, or a lot of the symptoms that menopause can bring, especially in that perimenopause season, it can be really difficult to find a way out of that great big or tornado, if you envision it like that. So I think what you're sharing are different approaches someone can take to help themselves get out of that. And some of the alchemies you talked about there, or one in particular, sounds like it is that tornado, the roller coaster of I'm up, down, or I'm just
Yes.
really feeling totally out of alignment.
Yeah, completely. And when I talk about mastery, because again, does that sound abstract? If I want to give the people that are listening to this some tips, what ends up happening in this liminal space is anything that's out of integrity is going to start popping up, right? And that's why you feel uncomfortable. And when I say integrity, I don't mean, are you a good person? If you actually, integrity is about strength. So if you think about, for example, integrity in engineering, if a bridge has high integrity, then it's really strong. So you're looking at the strength between what you have in your conscious world versus what is essentially happening below your neck. And this is a little bit of personal inquiry people can do, is that what I always say is that thoughts are situational and beliefs are not situational. And what that means is that a thought will change depending on the situation, and a belief is always the same. This mastery is about finding the stuff that you think and actually you don't truly believe. So, for example, let's say that you're sitting in a room with, I don't know, 10 women here, and you're able to say, I'm sexy. I'm sexy and I'm beautiful and I'm confident, for example. And then if I pick you up and I put you in a room of, say, I don't know, supermodels, and if you cannot also say in that room that I am beautiful and I'm sexy and I'm confident, then what you've identified is something that you think and something that you don't truly believe, because it's situational. So it changes. It's just a thought. And this is the thing. The liminal is saying all this stuff that you want to think about yourself. It's time to really believe it. It's time for every cell of your body to actually be on board with that. Because there's a lack of integrity if you're saying it. And when women say those things, they want to believe it, right? They want to say, I value myself and I love myself and I'm good enough and all the stuff. But if your body doesn't really believe it, then it's all just words. And that's what it's about. And I think, when you pass through something like perimenopause, all that stuff's coming up. It's like, have you not learnt yet that you're bloody brilliant? Like, it's time to embrace your brilliance. And this is a lot of what pops in that elevated identity. It's the power that we finally recognize when we let go of all the shit that we've been told about ourselves.
So I'm really fascinated, Michelle, what brought you to get into this space and to build this framework and learn all of the modalities that you have in your profession now to support other women?
So my story, so I was a brand and culture strategist. I was a consultant for like 15 years. So I used to work with exec teams, and that was great. It was very interesting. It was very cerebral, but I had that, that classic thing where I was like, this can't be it. I don't really want to do this. This isn't for the long term. It's interesting, but it's not fulfilling. So 7 years ago, I walked away from that career. I actually had no idea what I was going to do next. I was just like, I'll save up some money so that I don't have to make an immediate decision. And then I will explore. I will see what happens, because my intuition was like, this is not where you're meant to be. So I left that. I ended up, going up various avenues of things that I was drawn to. I became a meditation teacher. I started doing a master's in coaching. I studied, hypnosis and human design, the gene keys, all sorts of things. And then over the last 7 years of working with clients, that's been really refined and distilled down into what I call my precision subconscious strategy, which is where we go deeply into the body, into the subconscious, and into your energy field to recalibrate it to the frequency of that woman that you're actually becoming, so that you're resonant to all the stuff that is supposed to be coming into your life. And To be honest, I love it. I get to sit one-on-one with all these incredible women and guide them and support them through it. And it never ceases to amaze me the wisdom that is in the body. You know, the world that we live in is so heavily swayed towards the head. You know, we reward thinking and conceptual thinking and concepts, and it's all thinking, 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 and rationalness. And yet we have this body that has so much wisdom. And what you will find when you're going through a liminal space and you're moving between identities, there are two things that I see all the time. So one of them is that as you're moving through that liminal, there is going to be parts of your body that is like, we are not on board with this. Like, this is uncomfortable. And these are the old parts of the old identity. So you get weird flare ups, like you'll suddenly get a backache that you never had, or a rash will pop up, or something your body is talking about. So, like, for example, I was working with a client last week and she'd had a really big week. She'd started a very, very high level job, some other big stuff happening in her personal life. And she sat down and she said, I really feel that I've let go of so much and that I'm right on the edge of this identity. She said, but it's really weird. She said, this week, out of nowhere, my whole body went stiff. She said, I've never had any stiffness, but I felt so stiff. And she's about 50. And she said, I don't think it was just aging overnight, you know, and we go into the body and that was just a reaction to everything that was happening. And, you know, we released it and the stiffness disappeared. So you have stuff like that. The other thing that you have happen is that sometimes these ongoing, chronic stuff that we just sort of see as part of us, like I've had women who've, you know, had ongoing constipation for decades, for example, or other things like that, just stuff that they're like, it's just who I am, it's just a problem I've always had. When they shift into the elevated identity, it disappears. And the reason for that is that an identity has all sorts of attributes to it. It's not just your behaviors and the way that you think, but there is a body that belongs to that identity. And when you move into a different identity, very often that disease does not belong to the new identity. So, like, for example, if you've ever read the book Sybil, have you read that book?
No.
Oh, I got to recommend it. So it's a really old book. It's from like 1973. And the author was the psychoanalyst who worked with this woman who had 16 different personalities. So it's about multiple personality disorder, which funnily enough is not called that anymore. It's now called, I think, associated identity disorder or something different. Anyway, but when you look at people who have these multiple personalities, when they're in those different personalities or those different identities, they often have different physical attributes. So some of them are things like, you know, their voice changes, but some of them wear glasses and some of them don't need to wear glasses, for argument. Some of them have different problems with their bodies because all of that belongs to an identity. And so that's why I say when you're moving through a liminal, your body is full of so much information, because if you're moving, because this is the thing, yes, certainly if we think about perimenopause, stuff's happening in with our hormones, but your body's trying to tell you something. You know, that's why it's changing. So what's your body trying to tell you? Because that's where the knowledge often is of the bit that you need the upgrade on to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and it lends itself very much to the Eastern wisdom and approach to health, doesn't that whole mind-body connection? And I've learned, certainly from my own personal health journey, of how much we are connected. And that was something, again, I wasn't taught, because generally we aren't taught about that in our culture and society in the West. And when I had my mental health problems and physical health problems, every one of them I approached trying to solve individually. It was like, well, the mental health is one box, or the anxiety is a box, and having this stomach problem, digestive problem is another box, and going to see a doctor and they're looking at each one in isolation as well. And at one point in my health journey, a specialist had said to me, I think it was someone I was seeing for chronic migraine, was, you do know that to me, it sounded like you were saying you're causing these migraines because of the mental health problems you've got. And obviously I was very defensive and I'm not causing these. These migraines are happening. They're happening because there's something wrong in my brain or in my head. You know, I didn't know exactly what the root cause of a migraine was, but it just seemed very logical that, you know, there's something faulted somewhere that physically that's creating this physical pain and problem. And the mental health is in a different box over there. And it was only when I started my transformation in 2021, as I began to realize I needed to grow. I was very much, as I now know, in that liminal space of life has to change. I was made redundant and had other things that had come together to feel like, yeah, this is time to change, because I don't like where I am in life. I don't like how I feel in this life and in this body. And then it was only in my journey of starting to go down that path of personal growth and set my business up that I then understood that mind-body connection piece. And even now I'm still trying to absorb as much as I can, and I love talking to you about this in with the lens that you bring to it, because it's just so powerful, isn't it? It's like the body keeps the score. I know a lot of people have read or looked at some of that content online, and we've heard about it a bit more over the past few years. But yeah, it's just something that I think we naturally overlook and miss. And I think the signals many of us have in our perimenopause, menopause journey through symptoms are exactly that, signals that they're indicating something to us, aren't they?
They totally are. And you know, a lot of people will say, oh, but it's not me creating it. It is your body creating stuff, and your body also knows perfectly how to heal. Because, like, for example, you cut yourself, your body knows when to scab over, when to let the scab go, and it can do all that stuff. And I always say, you know, let's say I hit my arm against the cupboard in a minute. That's why my arm is hurting, right? But if there's not an external thing in that way, if it's something else, what is then creating it? So let's say you've got a problem with your stomach, and then you say, oh, but it's because my microbiome's out of whack. But what's choosing to make your microbiome out of whack? Or it's your body is creating all of it. And I mean, I have this one personal story that I will share with you. So, and this is all to do with the power of like what you say and what you're experiencing and how your body reacts when it's trying to give you a message. So this was back in March last year. It was a Thursday afternoon. It was about 2 p.m. and I was ridiculously tired. I was beyond exhausted. I went to bed. I was really lucky. I didn't have any clients that afternoon, and I just took myself off to bed. I woke up Friday morning and I could not walk. So my friend took me off to emergency. I was living up in Byron Bay in Australia at the time. They didn't really know what to do with me. They did a bunch of tests. It took a few weeks for them to diagnose it, and I'd contracted something called Ross River virus, which, if there's an Australian listening to this, they may have heard of it, but even most Australians don't know it. It's a mosquito-borne disease. Think like malarias and dengues. But what it does is it attacks your joints and your muscles. So I can tell you every single muscle on my body was agony, like even the tiny, so every joint, like every single joint. And what had happened was my knees had fused, so they wouldn't bend. That was why I couldn't walk. Now, what had happened was a couple of days before this, I was having a conversation with a friend, and I actually said that I feel crippled. And this was I was feeling crippled in the environment I was in. Literally a couple of days later, my body did crippled. It went ahead, and I had all the experience of genuinely feeling crippled. I could not touch the floor for 3 months because I couldn't bend down. So if I dropped something, I was shuffling around trying to pick it up. Really hard when you live on your own. And the interesting thing is that if you get bitten by a mosquito carrying Ross River virus, you don't necessarily get Ross River virus. There was an outbreak where I was living, and yet none of my friends contracted it. And the odds that none of them weren't bitten, for sure they were bitten. But my body, and this is my point, chose. So there was an external influence, that mosquito, but my body chose to have that reaction because of how I was feeling about stuff in my life. And so, you know, there's just one story. So it's really interesting to look at what your body's doing.
Yeah, I do totally get that. Just a couple of weeks ago, I've had a tough few weeks, and I've had some back issues for a couple of years, and I'd been feeling really strong. It had gone at the beginning of August, and this was kind of end of September, beginning of October, and I was thinking, oh, I'm feeling really strong again, back, to lifting decent weights and building up. And although I hadn't been feeling very stable, should we say, mentally and emotionally, I had been thinking that week about my back, and then chose to go for a little run on the Saturday morning. First time I think I've run even this year, because I'd just shifted the way I was exercising and moved my body. Did some little sprint runs, came back, thought, oh, I feel quite good. I think I'm going to do some lower body stuff, and did the workout fine. Wasn't doing a movement in terms of the workout. I had the weights on the side on a bench and just went to pick the weights up, and literally must have lifted them maybe an inch to lift them and then do a squat or a lunge or something. And I just felt this twinge down the side of my back and thought, oh, this doesn't feel good, put them down. Anyway, that was it. The back went, and I had probably about 5 days of really severe pain and limited movement. And I'd reflected on that and thought, this is my body telling me something, like this has happened when I'm not in a good state of mind overall, and when I have been thinking about that. And I think subconsciously that message of, oh, I'm feeling strong, but underneath the underlying worry, and this is something I have been working on over the past couple of years, is part of the recovery process and strengthening process, is to try to not have those subconscious worries and beliefs of, well, it's just going to happen again. There is something there wrong with you. You've been told that this has just happened, and a decline in your body and back strength and so on. So it's, yeah, I do really get that. I think it's just so interesting. And I think it all kind of intertwines together, doesn't it, with manifestation and this, universal law, and just how everything is so connected on that energy field. So I know you have lots of different modalities that you use as part of your work, and helping women to shift through that liminal space and to move into that new elevated identity. So just to kind of start to wrap us up, I'd love to know from you what tips you would give for someone. I always talk about 3 steps someone could try to take to build some habits. So, what would be something the listener could do themselves to begin to connect with that space and think about their elevated identity?
Absolutely. So, because it's all about mastery of self, you've got to come back to self. So, my first thing is remove noise. And that means as much noise as you can. Stop consuming stuff, take social media out, even cut out a bit of news, just cut out the opinions of other people. Just take away some of the noise. Because if we do think of it from a frequency perspective, it's all cluttering your field. So, the more that you can take out, the more you clean up the frequency of your field. The next thing I would say is listen to your body. It is talking to you, getting communication with your body. What does that mean in practice? Sit and feel what is happening in your body. Give your body some presence. Oh, I've got a tingle, I've got a rash, I've got a feeling there. Just feel your body. And the other part is I would really look at the people in your life, because there is going to be a place in this liminal space. This new identity isn't going to want all the people in her life that she has right now. And what I observe is a very interesting thing is at the beginning of the liminal, you are consciously removing people that you know you're not aligned with anymore. You start to step back from them. And then there is a point where your field calibrates and it starts removing people for you. And I warn you, it's a weird time, because you're suddenly like, everyone's falling away. And this is one of those moments of trust, but it's creating the space for, again, new people to come in. But you can start to accelerate this by starting off by going, okay, who am I truly not aligned with in my heart of hearts? And starting to step back from those people. Yeah, so it's remove the noise, listen to your body, and start reevaluating your relationships.
Fantastic tips. And it's so interesting, our final one, lots of the women that I work with, and this came up on the last retreat day that I held as well, talk about how their friendship and social groups, communities have really shifted, and often they see that as a problem. Feel like, and I've certainly been through this personally, you feel like, what's happened? I don't have any friends. But as you've just said, you don't realize that actually you are taking steps and making changes to shift. And this doesn't mean you have to no longer be friends with those people, but it's that the relationship has changed. And I think that's so common for so many women, as I say, who I've worked with, that they realize they want and need different relationships, different friendships. So it's very interesting that you've highlighted that as the third step somebody could take to begin this process.
Because it's also something you can do completely on your own. You know, you can really sit and go, who's not for me? Because we can only have in our life what we resonate with. And, you know, this new version of yourself is going to resonate with different stuff. And that's everything, because she might resonate with different food, different people, a different amount of money that she wants to be paid, a different type of work, a different environment. Like, it's endless, you know. So, but that's actually an easy one to do, or a simple one to do, should I say.
And it ties in with what you talked about with integrity as well, doesn't it? In terms of, you know, are the people who you surround yourself with people who are enabling you to live in integrity, to have that inner strength? I think that there's a big piece there, because I think many women carry friendships just because they've always been friends, without actually looking at, are these people who align with my values and help me to be the best version of me?
And I would say, if you are sitting in that liminal space and you're in that really uncomfortable bit, and I totally, you know, I empathize with you if you are, where you feel like, I just don't feel like myself. I'm not really energized by any of my relationships. I'm not sure I'm enjoying my work. I feel all over the place and everything just feels a bit meh. Yes, that doesn't feel nice, but you will move through that into a place where you will suddenly be so excited about everything again. It's inevitable, because the world is of balance.
And it's that vision, isn't it? It's having that vision and letting that be the driver, and not seeing it as some unrealistic daydream, but that is possible for you. That vision can be your reality. And Michelle, you mentioned the quiz, so we've got the link to that, which will be in the show notes. So I think that's a great place for someone to start as well, and then maybe use those results with those steps. Can they work hand in hand?
Yes, absolutely. So you'll find the quiz at michelleboyde.com/quiz, and Boyd has an E on the end. And then we'll obviously share those results with you. And then I send you some emails with some additional information if you'd like that. So yeah, great place to start, to at least anchor, okay, this is where I am in this liminal space, and this is what's happening for me. And this is what I get to do next.
And if people want more from you, where's the best place to come and have a look and connect?
So you can come and connect with me on Instagram if you want to see what I'm up to. I'm looking for a new home at the moment, so I'm all over the world. So that's at that is Michelle Boyde with a couple of underscores. It will be in the show notes, and then also my website is a great place, michelleboyde.com.
Fantastic. And you mentioned that some of the modalities you use are things like human design. So if anyone's interested in that in itself is just such an incredibly powerful tool to have a look at, isn't it?
It's another tool for self-mastery, because ultimately human design is about becoming yourself. And as we keep moving through life and we move through these significant liminal spaces, it's about mastering ourselves. So yeah, human design, the gene keys. And then, as I say, I've now created, this distillation of all the stuff that I work with into this precision subconscious strategy, which is what I work with, what you experience if you come and work with me.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll pop everything into the show notes, and I'm sure there will be lots of people wanting to come and have a look at that quiz, me included. So thank you, massively for your time. And I've just really enjoyed, from a personal perspective, this conversation. So I'm sure lots of the listeners will have taken a lot away as well.
Me too. It's been lovely to be here. I could keep chatting to you for another hour. But thank you so much for having me on, Nicola.
You're welcome. Thanks, Michelle. If this conversation stirred something in you, a sense that you're ready for more, but not quite sure what that looks like, that's not a crisis, it's a signal. Midlife is a crossroads, and if you ignore it, you risk getting swept into a spiral, mentally, physically, emotionally, and mistaking that chaos for your new normal. But with the right questions, the right support, and a deep reconnection to yourself, everything can shift. That's why I created the Midlife Reset Quiz to help you figure out where you are in this journey and what you might need to feel more aligned, clear, and in control. Take 2 minutes for yourself today and head to my quiz, the link is in the show notes, and start uncovering the version of you who's waiting to be remembered. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.